Arizona territory stretched endlessly under a sun that showed no mercy, the kind of heat that made men question their choices and their God in equal measure. Samuel Thornton sat at the edge of a grave he had dug himself 8 months prior, the wooden cross still standing straight despite the desert winds that tried to claim everything. The earth beneath him held Mary Catherine Thornton, 16 years old, stopped, dead by a bullet meant for someone else. The official report from Fort Whipple called it an Apache arrow. Sam knew better. He had pulled enough bullets from enough bodies during 4 years of Civil War to recognize the difference between iron and wood, between military issue and handmade. His hands, weathered and scarred from decades of hard living, turned over a reading primer. The pages were stiff with dried blood. Mary's blood, the brown stains forming a map of the last moments of her life. She had been holding this book when the shot came, holding it like a shield, like knowledge could stop lead. The mission school 15 miles south had been her world. The Apache children her purpose. She taught them English, mathematics, the things she believed would help them survive in a country that wanted them gone. The cavalry had fired on the building during a pursuit. Someone panicked, someone young, someone who would go home to his mother while Mary went into the ground. 6 months sober. The bottle of whiskey in his saddlebag remained unopened, a test he set for himself every morning. The cork had never been pulled, but the weight of it reminded him that oblivion was always within reach, always just one moment of weakness away. Before Mary died, he had been drinking himself into a grave of his own making. Trying to forget a wife lost to influenza during the war, trying to forget the faces of men he had killed at Antietam and Chancellorsville, and a dozen other places where the Union and the Confederacy had ground each other into blood and mud. Mary had been the light that kept him tethered to the living world. Without her, the darkness crept closer each day. The Colt Navy 1851 sat on his hip, its ivory grip worn smooth from years of use. He had cleaned it that morning, the same ritual he had performed every day since his discharge from the Army in 1865. The weight of it was familiar, comforting, in the way a scar becomes part of the skin. One chamber held a bullet, just one, and it had been there for 6 months. Some mornings he considered using it. Some mornings he removed it and reloaded the other chambers instead. This morning he had done neither, simply holstered the weapon and stood his knees, protesting the movement in the way joints do when a man passes 50 and keeps going. The ride to Blackwell's trading post took him through country that had been fought over, bled over, died over for decades. Apache land, Mexican land, American land. The names changed, but the dirt remained the same. His mare picked her way through mesquite and cactus, past the dried bones of cattle and the occasional human skull that the desert revealed when the wind shifted the sand. 12 miles of desolation, 12 miles to remember why living required effort and why effort sometimes felt like too much to ask. Henry Blackwell stood behind the counter of his trading post, a man of 50 years who had buried his own wife 4 years earlier and understood the particular silence that follows profound loss. No words of sympathy, no platitudes about time healing wounds. They drank coffee together in the kind of quiet that only exists between men who know that some things cannot be spoken, can only be endured. The coffee was bitter and strong, the way soldiers drank it in camp when the supplies ran low, and the only goal was to stay awake through the next watch. Henry poured without asking, slid the cup across the worn wooden counter, and returned to his inventory without breaking the silence. This was their monthly ritual, had been since Mary's funeral, when Henry had shown up with a shovel and helped dig the grave without being asked. After the second cup, Sam found his voice. Still sober. Henry nodded, his hands busy counting tins of beans. 6 months, 2 weeks, 3 days. Sarah's been gone 4 years, still counts sometimes. The door opened, bringing with it a blast of heat and a drifter who looked like he had been rode hard and put away wet. Dust caked his clothes, and his eyes held the wary look of a man who expected trouble from every corner. He bought jerky and asked for water, then lingered near the counter in the way men do when they have information to sell or stories to tell. Heard Silas Crane's got something special at the auction today. Henry's jaw tightened, but he kept counting. Caught himself a real Apache devil. Woman warrior who killed 2 soldiers with her bare hands. Probably fetch a good price from someone who wants field labor or worse. The drifter grinned, showing gaps where teeth should have been, and Sam felt something cold settle in his stomach. Mary had taught Apache children. She had spoken their names at the dinner table, told them about their progress, their dreams, their fears. This woman, whoever she was, might have known them, might have known Mary. Henry caught his eye and gave the slightest shake of his head. It's not your fight, Sam. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe nothing was his fight anymore. But the thought of another human being sold like livestock, sold by men who thought bullets and chains could solve every problem, made something in his chest tighten. Mary would have gone to that auction. Mary would have found a way to help. The question was whether Sam had enough of Mary's courage left in him to do the same, or whether 6 months of grief had hollowed him out completely. He left without finishing his coffee, mounted his mare, and pointed her toward Prescott. The auction yard sat on the edge of town, a makeshift platform of warped boards baking under the midday sun. 40 or 50 men had gathered, ranchers and miners and soldiers off duty, their faces reflecting curiosity and cruelty in equal measure. Money changed hands on side bets, wagers on how long the Apache woman would last before breaking how much fight she had left in her. Silas Crane stood on the platform, sweating through his shirt, his voice carrying over the murmur of the crowd. He was a dealer in everything livestock and supplies and occasionally human beings when the opportunity presented itself. The law allowed it, called it indentured servitude, gave it a name that sounded civilized. The reality was uglier, always had been. The woman he dragged onto the platform made Sam forget how to breathe. She stood with chains on her wrists and ankles, but her posture remained unbowed. Her chin lifted in defiance that transcended her captivity. Apache, clearly with the bearing of someone born to leadership. Her black hair fell in braids adorned with beads, and her doe-skin dress was torn and stained, but still carried the intricate beadwork of her people. What stopped Sam's breath were the marks on her face, 3 painted symbols in red that stood out against her bronze skin like war paint. One across her forehead, another on her left cheek, a third near her jaw. Warrior markings, the kind carried by those who had seen battle and survived. Her eyes scanned the crowd with cold assessment, measuring each man as a potential threat, calculating odds and distances and possibilities for escape. When those eyes found Sam, something shifted. Not recognition exactly, but acknowledgement. One soldier recognizing another across enemy lines, one survivor measuring another's scars. Crane grabbed her arm, yanking her forward for the crowd's inspection. What we have here, gentlemen, is a prime specimen. Strong, healthy, young enough to provide years of service. Speaks English, so no need for hand signals. The woman jerked her arm free with a violent twist, chains rattling like thunder. The crowd muttered its surprise. Women were supposed to be docile, frightened, broken. This one looked like she would tear out throats with her teeth, given half a chance. Crane recovered quickly, his showman's smile never faltering. Captured near the Sierra Ancha Mountains. Killed 2 soldiers before they got the irons on her. One lost an eye. The other won't walk right again. Devil woman, someone in the crowd muttered. Not worth the trouble, another voice added. Crane's smile thinned. Bidding starts at $5. Silence answered him. $5 could buy a good horse, a week of whiskey passage on a stage to California. $5 for a woman who looked more likely to murder you in your sleep than cook your breakfast seemed like poor value. $4 then. More silence. Yamais. The crowd shifted, losing interest, already turning away to find entertainment elsewhere. Crane's face flushed red beneath the brim of his hat. $3. Surely she's worth $3 for the work she can do. Sam watched the woman's face as Crane spoke, watched her understand exactly what was happening, exactly what she represented to these men. Property to be bought and sold, labor to be extracted, humanity to be denied. Her jaw tightened, and when she spoke, her voice cut through the desert heat like a blade. I would rather die than be owned by any man here. Perfect English, not the broken speech of someone with passing knowledge. These were the words of education, of intelligence, of someone who understood exactly what slavery meant and refused it with every fiber of her being. The crowd froze, stunned into silence by the clarity of her defiance. Sam found himself stepping forward before his mind caught up with his body. The money in his pocket was meant for supplies, for the basics that kept a ranch running, even when the rancher had lost all interest in running it. 3 worn dollar bills saved from 6 months of not drinking, 6 months of choosing survival over oblivion, one day at a time. His voice, when it came, surprised him with its steadiness. $3. Heads turned. Men who knew him stared in disbelief. Sam Thornton, the rancher who had buried his daughter after Apaches supposedly killed her, now bidding on an Apache woman who had killed 2 soldiers. The irony was not lost on anyone present. Crane snatched the money from Sam's hand before anyone could reconsider or counterbid. Sold to Thornton. The woman's eyes locked on Sam, searching for the trap, for the angle, for the cruelty that experience had taught her to expect from white men in general, and soldiers in particular. Sam climbed the steps to the platform slowly, hands visible, movements deliberate. He had gentled horses and diffused dangerous men, knew that the wrong gesture could turn a tense situation lethal. The key to her manacles hung from Crane's belt. Sam held out his hand and Crane reluctantly surrendered it. "Watch yourself, Thornton." She put a knife through Jenkins's leg, nearly bled out before they got him to a doctor, and Simmons will never see out of his right eye again. Sounds like they deserved it. Sam approached the woman the way he would approach a wounded animal, with respect and caution in equal measure. She tensed, ready to fight or flee despite the chains, despite the odds. "May I?" The question rather than a command seemed to surprise her. Her eyes narrowed, searching his face for deception, but she extended her wrists slightly. Sam unlocked the manacles, noted the raw skin beneath where iron had bitten into flesh for days or weeks. Anger flared hot in his chest at the evidence of mistreatment, but he kept his expression neutral, kept his movements careful and slow. The chains fell to the platform with a heavy clank that sounded like freedom, or the beginning of something neither of them could yet name. She rubbed her wrists, never taking her eyes from his face. "What game are you playing, white man?" "No game. I have a horse tied at the hitching post. Water and food in the saddlebags. You're welcome to take what you need." Several men in the crowd called out warnings, their voices overlapping in a chorus of concern and prejudice. "You're making a mistake, Thornton. She'll knife you in your sleep." Sam ignored them, stepped back to give it her space, gestured toward the steps leading down from the platform. "After you." She hesitated, clearly trying to understand his motives, to find the catch in an offer that seemed too simple to be genuine. Finally, she moved past him, descended the steps with the fluid grace of someone trained in combat, someone always ready for the next threat. Sam followed at a respectful distance, aware of how the crowd parted to let them through, many hands hovering near weapons just in case. His mare waited at a hitching post, a sturdy chestnut that eyed the stranger with equine caution. Sam untied the reins but made no move to mount. Instead, he opened a saddlebag and pulled out a canteen, offered it to the woman without ceremony. "Drink. The desert's unforgiving this time of year." She took the canteen but didn't drink, immediately studied him with those dark eyes that seemed to see through flesh, to bone, to the truth beneath whatever lies a man might tell. "Why did you buy me?" The directness of the question caught him off guard, though it shouldn't have. She had already shown she was not one for games or subtlety, because no human being should be in chains. "Pretty words, but I've heard pretty words from white men before. They mean nothing." Sam nodded, accepting the rebuke. "Fair enough. Judge me by what I do, not what I say." She finally drank from the canteen, water trickling down her chin as she gulped deeply, months of thirst, taking precedence over caution. Sam waited until she finished, then spoke again. "There's a trading post run by a woman named Ruth Calloway, about 2 days west of here. She helps people who need it, asks no questions. I can take you there." "And what do you want in return?" "Nothing. Once you're safely at Calloway's place, we go our separate ways." The suspicion in her eyes didn't waver, and Sam couldn't blame her. In her position, he wouldn't trust a stranger's generosity either. She handed back the canteen, and when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of decisions made in impossible circumstances. "I'll walk. You can ride your horse." Sam understood her need to maintain some measure of control, some autonomy, in a situation where she had been stripped of both. "As you wish." They left Prescott together, an unlikely pair, drawing stares and whispers. The grieving rancher and the warrior woman walking side by side, yet separated by a chasm of history and mistrust and blood spilled on both sides of a conflict neither of them had started, but both had lost pieces of themselves too. 5 miles from town, when Prescott had vanished into heat shimmer and dust, she made her move. Sam had been expecting, it had been watching her body language, the slight shifts in posture that telegraphed intention. The moment they crested a ridge and put the town out of sight, she broke into a run, veering sharply away from the trail and heading deeper into the desert. Sam made no attempt to chase her. He mounted his mare and followed at a distance, keeping her in sight, but giving her the space to make her own choice. He knew this terrain knew that without water and shelter, the desert would kill her before sunset tomorrow. He also knew that freedom, even the freedom to die on your own terms, mattered more than safety purchased through captivity. The Arizona sun hammered down without mercy as she ran, her form shimmering in the heat haze like a mirage. She moved with the efficiency of someone trained for endurance, conserving energy even in flight. But the weeks of captivity and minimal food had taken their toll. After an hour, her pace slowed. After 90 minutes, she was stumbling more than running. When she finally collapsed to her knees, Sam approached, slowly dismounting while still at a respectful distance. The nearest water is 10 miles south, or we can continue west toward the trading post. Your choice. She looked up at him, face streaked with sweat and dust, eyes burning with frustration and anger, and the terrible realization that geography and biology had limits that willpower could not overcome. Why follow me? Why not let me die out here if that's what I choose? Sam removed the canteen from his saddle and placed it on the ground between them, far enough that she would have to choose to take it, close enough that the choice was real. Is that what you choose, to die in the desert when you could live and fight another day? She stared at the canteen, then at Sam, her breathing harsh and ragged in the stillness. What do you know of fighting? I served 4 years in the Union Army during the war. Saw things no man should see, did things no man should have to do. And I've been fighting my own battles since my daughter died 8 months ago. Something in his tone must have reached her, some recognition of shared grief, because she took the canteen and drank deeply before asking the question he knew was coming. How did she die? Sam met her gaze directly, gave her the truth she deserved. She was teaching Apache children to read at a missionary outpost. A border skirmish broke out. She was caught in the crossfire. Understanding dawned in her eyes, complicated and painful. And yet you bought my freedom. I couldn't save her. Maybe I can help you. She studied him for a long moment, assessing the truth in his words, weighing survival against pride, future against past. When she finally nodded, it felt like a treaty being signed between two small nations exhausted by war. The trading post, we go there. Sam gestured to his mare. You should ride. The heat will drain your strength quickly. She shook her head, a small concession, but an important one. I walk, but beside you now, not behind. They resumed their journey, walking side by side through a landscape that cared nothing for their agreements, or their grief, or their fragile alliance. The sun tracked across the sky, and neither spoke for miles, the rhythmic crunch of their footsteps on sandy soil, the only sound besides the occasional call of a hawk circling overhead. As the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the desert floor, Sam spotted suitable shelter for the night. A small formation of rocks that would provide protection from wind and predators, defensible if it came to that. He gestured toward it. We should stop here for the night. Traveling after dark is dangerous in this terrain. She nodded, her practicality overriding any remaining desire to flee. They gathered brush for a small fire, worked together in silence, each taking measure of the other through peripheral vision and careful attention to small gestures. Sam unsaddled his mare and set out their meager provisions, while she arranged rocks for a fire ring with the efficiency of someone who had made camp 1,000 times. When flames began to dance in the gathering dusk, Sam handed her a portion of jerky and dried fruit. She accepted it but didn't eat immediately, watching as Sam took his own share and began to eat, proving it wasn't poisoned, wasn't a trap. The marks on her face caught the firelight, the red symbols seeming to glow against her skin. Sam found himself speaking before he had fully decided to. The marks on your face, they have meaning. She touched the symbol on her forehead, her fingers tracing the lines with a gentleness that contrasted with the hardness in her eyes. This one is for my brother, who died defending our people. Her hand moved to her cheek. This one is for the children I have sworn to protect. Finally, she traced the mark near her jaw. And this one is for the person I will become if I survive this journey. You said children, not your children. Her expression softened slightly, the first crack in the armor she wore. Children of my tribe, many orphaned by your soldiers or by disease. I gather them, teach them, keep them safe. The parallel to Mary was so stark that Sam felt physical pain in his chest, the old wound of loss tearing open again. His daughter, too, had been drawn to teaching children, not her own, believing in the power of knowledge to transform lives and bridge divides. Where are these children now? Her gaze grew distant, focused on something beyond the firelight, beyond the desert, beyond the immediate danger. Hidden, safe, I hope. She turned her attention back to Sohan, and the intensity in her eyes reminded him of interrogations during the war of officers trying to extract information from prisoners who knew that silence was its own form of resistance. Why did you really buy me? $3 is nothing, but a man does not help his enemy without reason. Sam stared into the fire, watching the flames consume the brush, thinking about how to answer a question he wasn't sure he fully understood himself. When he looked up and met her gaze directly, he chose truth over comfort. 8 months ago, a group of soldiers fired on a missionary outpost, believing Apache raiders were using it as cover. My daughter Mary was inside teaching children to read. By the time I arrived responding to news of trouble, she was already gone. He paused, the memory still raw despite the months that had passed. The official report claimed it was an Apache arrow that killed her. But I've seen enough wounds to know a bullet when I see one. Some young, frightened soldier fired without identifying his target. And you knew this soldier. Her perception cut through his careful phrasing. I knew his commanding officer, Colonel Marcus Brennan. We served together in the war, saved each other's lives at Antietam. He gave the order to fire, even though he knew Mary volunteered there, even though the raiders they were pursuing were more likely the families seeking food and medicine than warriors planning an attack. Yet you do not seek vengeance. It was an observation, not a question, but Sam answered it anyway. Vengeance won't bring Mary back, and it won't honor what she believed in. She saw humanity in everyone she met, even those others feared or hated. The woman considered this, turning the dried meat over in her hands before finally taking a bite. They ate in silence for a while, the fire crackling between them, the vast darkness of the desert surrounding their small circle of light. Sam broke the silence eventually. These children you protect. Where are they now? She hesitated, weighing how much to reveal, how much trust to place in a man she had met hours earlier. When she spoke, her voice carried both pride and worry in equal measure. Hidden in caves in the Sierra Ancha Mountains, 14 of them ages 5 to 12. The older ones care for the younger. I taught them how to survive, how to find water and food, how to stay quiet when soldiers pass. Sam nodded, understanding dawning like sunrise. You sacrificed your freedom for theirs, as any mother would do for her children. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. She had called them her children, even though she had earlier indicated they weren't her biological offspring. Sam recognized that kind of love, the kind that transcends blood, that chooses to care even when walking away would be easier. How long can they survive alone? Her voice grew strained, fear breaking through the warrior's mask. They have food and water for perhaps another week. After that, they must either move or starve. But moving means exposure, means risk of discovery by patrols. Sam stared into the fire, calculating distances and dangers. The Sierra Ancha Mountains lay at least 3 days' hard ride north in the opposite direction from the safety of the trading post. Going there would mean abandoning his original plan, risking encounter with military patrols, possibly even facing Brennan himself. Every tactical instinct told him to take this woman west to safety and walk away clean. Every human instinct told him those 14 children were going to die if someone didn't help them. Before he could respond, a sound from beyond their small circle of firelight stopped him cold. The soft but unmistakable clink of metal against metal, followed by the quiet crunch of a boot on gravel. The woman heard it too, her body tensing instantly, hand moving instinctively to her side where a weapon should have been. Sam slowly reached for his rifle, lying within arm's reach, moving with the careful precision of a soldier who knows that sudden movements draw fire. His fingers closed around the stock, just as the darkness beyond the firelight gave way to 3 figures, each holding a rifle pointed directly at their camp. At their center stood Colonel Marcus Brennan, his gray mustache and military bearing unmistakable, even in the dim light. At 58, he retained the ramrod posture and commanding presence that had earned him respect during 4 years of war and a decade of frontier duty. His gray hair was cropped short beneath his military hat, and his eyes held the cold assessment of a man who had made difficult decisions and learned to live with them. Well, well, Sam Thornton, I heard rumors you'd bought yourself an Apache killer, but I didn't quite believe it until now. Sam kept his hands visible, rifle untouched for the moment, voice level and calm. Colonel, that's a dangerous woman you're harboring, Thornton. a known agitator and killer. 2 of my men dead because of her. The woman remained perfectly still, expression revealing nothing, though Sam could sense the tension coiled in her body like a spring ready to release. She's no threat to anyone here. We're just passing through the territory. Brennan's laugh held no humor, just the bitter edge of a man who had stopped believing in simple solutions years ago. Passing through with a woman who's killed 2 of my men and incited rebellion among the reservation Apache? I don't think so. I bought her fair and square at auction. She's under my protection now. Brennan's voice hardened, and Sam recognized the tone from the war from officers about to give orders they knew would get men killed. Protection, like you protected your daughter. The barbs struck deep, but Sam kept his expression neutral, refusing to give Brennan the satisfaction of a reaction. Mary has nothing to do with this. She has everything to do with this. Ever since she died, you've been undermining military authority in this territory, questioning official reports, suggesting that my men fired without proper cause. I know a bullet wound when I see one, Marcus. Brennan stepped closer, rifle still trained on Sam. You know what I see, Thornton, a man destroyed by grief. A man looking for someone to blame. A man who's forgotten which side he's on in this war. There is no war, just people trying to survive. Tell that to the settlers who've been raided. Tell that to the stagecoach drivers who've been ambushed. Brennan's gaze shifted to the woman. Tell that to the families of the men she killed. The woman spoke for the first time, her voice steady and clear. Your men attacked me first. I defended myself. Brennan's eyes narrowed. You'll hang for what you've done. Sam found himself standing, placing his body between Brennan and the woman, a gesture that surprised him as much as it seemed to surprise the colonel. She's not going anywhere with you. Whatever grievance you have with me, Marcus, leave her out of it. A cold smile spread across Brennan's face, and Sam saw in it the shadows of old friendship, twisted by grief and duty into something unrecognizable. This isn't about grievances, Thornton. This is about justice. Justice for the men who died. Justice for the territory. Justice, or is it about the promotion you lost when questions were raised about Mary's death? About the inquiry that followed when I pushed for the truth? Brennan's expression darkened, and for a moment Sam thought violence was inevitable. Then the colonel's jaw tightened, and he gestured to his men. Take the Apache woman. We'll deal with Thornton separately. As the soldiers moved forward, the woman suddenly lunged for the fire, grabbing a burning branch and swinging it in a wide arc. Sparks flew like stars, being born and dying in an instant, and one soldier reeled backward with a cry of pain as flames caught him across the face. Sam seized the moment of confusion, diving for his rifle and rolling to one knee. He chambered around and aimed not at Brennan, but at the ground near his feet, the warning clear in the gesture. Tell your men to stand down, Colonel. Brennan's rifle now aimed at Sam, and the standoff stretched across seconds that felt like hours. The fire crackled. The wounded soldier cursed, and somewhere in the darkness, a coyote called to its pack. Finally, Brennan raised his hand, signaling his men to hold position. You're making a grave mistake, Thornton, siding with an Apache against your own kind. My kind are people who value human life, people who keep their word, people who don't murder children and call it military necessity. The woman stood beside Sam now, the burning branch still in her hand, its flame illuminating the fierce determination on her face. Brennan looked between them, calculation visible in his eyes, weighing options and outcomes. You know what she is, Thornton, a savage, a killer. I know she's a woman who sacrificed her freedom to protect children, which makes her more honorable than you'll ever be. Brennan's face contorted with fury, the mask of military discipline cracking to reveal the rage beneath. This isn't over. The territory isn't big enough for you to hide in. We're not hiding. Sam kept his rifle steady, kept his voice calm, kept his eyes locked on Brennan's, until the colonel finally nodded curtly to his men and began to retreat into the darkness. Only when the sound of their horses had faded into the distance did Sam lower his rifle. Beside him, the woman dropped the burning branch back into the fire, her hands trembling slightly from the adrenaline that was only now beginning to ebb. She looked at Sam with something that might have been respect or might have been simple reassessment of who he was and what he was capable of. He will return with more men. Yes, Sam began packing up their meager camp, moving with the efficiency of a soldier who knows that staying in a compromised position invites death. Those children in the mountains. How quickly can we reach them? Surprise flickered across her face, the first genuine emotion he had seen break through her carefully maintained control. Sam nodded as he finished saddling his mare, working by the dying firelight. I'm not letting 14 children die in the wilderness, and I'm not letting Brennan get his hands on you. So yes, we. For the first time since they met, her expression softened into something that wasn't quite trust, but might be the beginning of understanding. 3 days by horse if we travel light and through the night. Faster if we push hard. Sam offered her the reins, the gesture carrying more weight than the simple act suggested. You should ride. We'll make better time. After a moment's hesitation, she accepted, mounting the horse with practiced ease that spoke of a life lived in the saddle. Sam walked alongside, leading the mare, as they set off under the silver light of a quarter moon. Behind them, the fire dwindled to embers, and then darkness, marking the end of one chapter and the uncertain beginning of another. The desert stretched before them, vast and indifferent to their plans or their pain or their fragile alliance. Somewhere ahead, 14 children waited in mountain caves, unaware that their lives hung in the balance of choices made by two strangers who had every reason to be enemies and were instead becoming something neither of them had expected. The night closed around them like a fist, and they walked deeper into it, toward danger or redemption, or perhaps both at once. Dawn broke across the foothills of the Sierra Ancha Mountains, painting the eastern sky in shades of copper and gold that lasted only minutes before the sun climbed higher and bleached the color from the world. Sam Thornton felt every one of his 52 years in the ache of his knees, the protest of his lower back, the dull throb of an old shrapnel wound from Antietam that had never healed quite right. They had traveled through most of the night, stopping only when the terrain became too treacherous to navigate in darkness, and his body was demanding payment for the effort. The woman rode his mare with the ease of someone born to it, scanning their surroundings with constant vigilance. She had not offered her name, and Sam had not asked, understanding that names carried power and trust had to be earned before such gifts could be given. Instead, they had traveled in a silence broken only by necessary communication about direction and terrain, two soldiers on a mission that grew more dangerous with each mile north. The mountains rose before them like the spine of some ancient creature, their peaks still holding snow, despite the summer heat that baked the lower elevations. Pine and juniper replaced the desert scrub, and the air carried the scent of resin and damp earth. Sam's mare picked her way carefully over rocks and through narrow defiles, the woman guiding her with subtle shifts of weight and pressure that spoke of years in the saddle. When they stopped to rest near a spring that bubbled from a crack in the rock face, Sam lowered himself to the ground with a grunt that he couldn't quite suppress. The woman dismounted with fluid grace, filled the canteen, and brought it to him without comment. He drank deeply the cold water, shocking his system awake, and only then noticed her watching him with an expression that might have been concern or might have been simple assessment of his utility. Getting old as hell. She settled onto a flat rock nearby, her movements economical and precise. You move like wounded bear, proud but slow. Sam laughed despite the pain radiating through his joints. Fair assessment. She studied him for a moment, then pulled a small pouch from inside her dress. The Apache carried their medicine in leather bags decorated with symbols Sam didn't understand, and she opened this one, carefully extracting dried leaves that she crushed between her fingers. The scent was sharp and green, cutting through the pine-heavy air. Yarrow, for pain and to prevent infection. She mixed the crushed leaves with water from the canteen, creating a paste that she applied to the shrapnel scar visible where Sam's shirt had ridden up during the climb. Her touch was gentle but impersonal, the practiced efficiency of someone who had treated many wounds on many warriors. Sam held still, watching her work, seeing the concentration in her face. You're good at this. I have treated many warriors. Your scars tell stories. She traced the puckered tissue where shrapnel had torn through muscle and lodged near bone where a Union Army surgeon had dug it out with forceps and whiskey, while Sam bit down on a leather strap. This one almost killed you. Marcus Brennan pulled me out, carried me 2 miles under Confederate fire, saved my life. Her hand stilled for a moment. And now he hunts you. War changes men. Some it breaks, some it turns into something else. She finished applying the paste and tore a strip from her already damaged dress to bind it in place. The cooling effect was immediate, the pain receding to a dull background hum that Sam could push aside. What did war do to you? Sam took his time answering, watching the spring water pool and overflow carving new channels in the rock, as it had for centuries before he was born, and would for centuries after he died. Taught me that killing is easy, living with it is hard. This is why you bought my freedom, to balance scales. Maybe. Or maybe I just needed to save someone, since I couldn't save Mary, or my wife, or the dozens of men who died under my command. She sat back, her dark eyes holding his with an intensity that made him feel transparent, as if she could see through skin and bone to the guilt that lived in his marrow. You did not fail, Mary. She chose her path. That's what I tell myself. Doesn't make it true. They remained there for another hour, Sam's body reluctantly accepting the rest, even as his mind calculated distances and dangers. The woman checked the mare's hooves, adjusted the saddle, and performed the small maintenance tasks that kept equipment functional and people alive. When they finally resumed the climb, Sam felt marginally better though, whether from the yarrow or simply from being less alone with his thoughts he couldn't say. The cave entrance, when they finally reached it near dusk of the second day, was little more than a shadow against the cliff face easily missed if you didn't know exactly where to look. The woman had been growing more tense with each mile, her body language shifting from wary to alert to something approaching frantic. She dismounted before Sam could stop her and gave a bird call that sounded exactly like a quail, which would have been unremarkable, except that quail didn't live at this elevation. The silence that followed stretched for 30 seconds, 40, and Sam watched her face grow tight with fear. Then faintly an answering call came from somewhere above them. The woman's entire body sagged with relief, and when she called out in Apache, her voice cracked with emotion. The boy who emerged from the rocks moved like smoke, given form appearing suddenly where a moment before there had been only stone and shadow. 12 years old, maybe 13, with the wiry build of someone who had grown up hungry but strong. His hair was long and loose, his clothing a mix of traditional Apache and pieces scavenged from who knows where, and in his hand he held a knife that was too large for him, but which he clearly knew how to use. His eyes went immediately to Sam, and the suspicion there was so complete, so absolute, that Sam recognized it as the look of a child who had learned that survival meant trusting no one, especially not white men in soldiers' clothes. The woman spoke rapidly in Apache, gesturing to Sam, her tone urgent and explanatory. The boy's expression didn't soften, but he did lower the knife slightly and responded in English, his accent marking him as someone who had learned the language young and well. "Who is the white man?" "A friend. He helped me escape." The boy's laugh was bitter, too old for his face. "White men are not friends." Sam dismounted slowly, keeping his hands visible, making no move toward the Colt at his hip. He had seen that look before on young soldiers who had been in one too many battles, who had learned that the world was cruel and trust was a luxury that got people killed. The boy needed proof, not promises, and Sam understood that language. "Fair. I wouldn't trust me either, son." The word son seemed to catch the boy off guard, a flicker of something crossing his face before the mask of suspicion slammed back down. Sam unbuckled his gun belt and laid it on the ground between them. The Colt Navy 1851 and all the history it carried surrendered without hesitation. "I'm not here to hurt anyone. I'm here because a brave girl named Mary asked me to protect her students. You were one of them." The boy froze, and Sam saw the exact moment when memory and recognition collided with present circumstances. His eyes widened, and when he spoke again, his voice had lost some of its edge. "You are Bond, Teacher Mary's father." "I am." The knife dropped completely now, and the boy's face crumpled with grief that he had clearly been holding in check for months. His voice, when he found it again, was small and broken in a way that made Sam's chest ache. "Teacher Mary is gone." "Yes, but she loved you. She told me about you, about all her students. And before she died, she made me promise to keep you safe if I could. I'm trying to keep that promise." The boy studied Sam's face for a long moment, looking for lays or tricks or the thousand small betrayals that experience had taught him to expect. Whatever he saw, there must have satisfied some internal calculation, because he finally nodded and gestured toward the narrow crack in the rock face. "Follow." The others wait inside. Sam retrieved his gun belt, but didn't buckle it on, carrying it in his hand as he followed the boy and the woman through an opening barely wide enough for his shoulders. The passage was dark and close, the air cool and damp after the desert heat, and Sam had to turn sideways in places to squeeze through. His breathing echoed off stone walls, and for a moment he felt the old panic from the war, the memory of being trapped in a collapsed mine shaft while Confederate artillery pounded the ground above. He pushed the memory down and kept moving, focusing on the dim light ahead. The passage opened abruptly into a chamber large enough to stand upright in, illuminated by narrow fissures in the ceiling that admitted thin shafts of sunlight. What stopped Sam's breath wasn't the size of the space or the ingenious way the Apache had used natural features for shelter and defense. It was the children. 14 of them, ranging from perhaps 5 years old to 12, stared at him with expressions that ran the spectrum from terror to curiosity to the blank exhaustion of those who had run out of emotions to spare. They were thin, all of them, with the kind of hunger that went beyond missing a few meals and into the territory of slow starvation. Their clothes were patched and repatched, their faces smudged with dirt, and several showed signs of illness that even Sam's untrained eye could identify as serious. A small girl, perhaps 6 years old, lay on a crude bed of furs and pine boughs, her face flushed with fever that even from across the cave, Sam could see was dangerously high. Her breathing was shallow and labored, each breath a wet rasp that spoke of fluid in the lungs. Pneumonia most likely, and without treatment, she would be dead within days. The woman went to the sick child, immediately kneeling beside her and placing a hand on her forehead. The tenderness in that gesture, the way her hardness melted into something soft and maternal, told Sam everything he needed to know about who this woman really was beneath the warrior's exterior. Mary's primer lay beside the sick child's bed, the pages warped and stained but carefully preserved. Sam felt something break inside his chest at the sight of it, at the realization that these children had kept his daughter's book, had honored her memory in the only way they could. They had loved her, and she had loved them, and both had paid the price for caring in a world that punished kindness as weakness. The boy who had led them in spoke quietly. "This is Kimmy. She has been sick 3 days. We tried the medicine Ayasha taught us, but nothing helps. Yesterday she stopped eating. This morning she would not wake when I called her." Sam moved closer, careful not to startle the other children who pressed themselves against the cave walls as he passed. He knelt beside the sick girl and gently touched her neck, feeling for the pulse that would tell him how much time they had. It was there but rapid and thready, her small heart working overtime to compensate for lungs that couldn't get enough oxygen into her blood. Without modern medicine, without proper care, this child was dying. "Where's the other twin? You said there were 14. The boy's face went carefully blank, and Sam recognized that particular expression from the war. It was the look of someone delivering bad news they knew would hurt. "Chayton went for water yesterday morning. He has not returned. We were afraid to search with soldiers so close." Sam closed his eyes briefly, doing the mental arithmetic. A 5-year-old boy alone in these mountains for over 24 hours, possibly injured, definitely terrified. The temperature dropped significantly at night, and there were predators, both animal and human, that would see a small child as easy prey. "How far is the spring?" 2 miles west. There is a small pool where we get water. Chayton goes every day. He knows the way. Sam stood his decision already made, even though every tactical instinct told him it was insane. "I need to find him. Show me the route he would have taken." The boy opened his mouth to protest, but the woman spoke first, her voice carrying an edge of command that suggested she had been giving orders long before capture had stripped her of authority. "Dakota will go with you. He knows the paths. I will stay with the children and prepare them to move if necessary." Sam shook his head. It's too dangerous for him. The boy Dakota apparently drew himself up to his full height, which brought him approximately to Sam's chest, and spoke with dignity that would have been funny if it wasn't so deadly serious. "Chayton is my brother. I will find him." The woman looked at Sam, and something passed between them, an understanding that transcended words. She had given him trust. Now he had to give it back by allowing her to make decisions about her own children, even if those decisions carried risk. "All right, but we leave now. Every hour that passes makes it less likely we find him alive." Dakota nodded and moved to gather supplies while Sam checked his rifle, making sure the action was clean and the ammunition dry. The woman approached him, speaking quietly so the other children wouldn't hear. Brennan's soldiers will be searching these mountains. If they find you, I know, but I didn't come this far to let a 5-year-old die because I was too cautious to take risks. She reached out and touched his arm briefly, the first deliberate contact she had initiated, and the weight of that gesture carried more meaning than any speech could have. Be careful. These children need you. Dakota needs you. Sam met her eyes and saw in them the reflection of his own fear, his own desperate hope that somehow, against all odds, they could save lives instead of just counting the dead. He nodded, collected Dakota with a gesture, and headed back toward the narrow passage that led outside. The descent from the caves was faster than the climb had been, Dakota setting a pace that would have challenged a man half Sam's age. The boy moved through the terrain like water flowing downhill, finding the easiest path by instinct, never hesitating at intersections or forks. Sam followed his breath, coming harder than he liked his legs, protesting the constant jarring impact of steep descent. They reached the spring as the sun touched the western horizon, casting long shadows across a landscape that should have been peaceful but felt wrong in ways Sam couldn't quite articulate. The spring itself was clear and cold, bubbling up from some underground source and forming a pool about 10 feet across before overflowing into a thin stream that disappeared into rocks and brush. Signs of disturbance were everywhere once you knew to look. Small footprints in the mud, a water skin lying abandoned on a flat rock, bent grass where someone had run in panic. Dakota examined the tracks with the concentration of a much older hunter, reading the story the earth told about what had happened here. His face, when he looked up, was tight with fear, barely held in check. He heard something, ran that way. He pointed west away from the cave into terrain that grew progressively more broken and difficult. Sam studied the ground and found what Dakota had seen: the transition from walking to running, the splayed prints of someone moving fast and frightened, and then disturbingly drops of blood on a rock. They followed the trail as the light failed Sam, keeping one eye on the tracks and the other on their surroundings, aware that whoever or whatever had scared the boy might still be nearby. The trail led up a steep slope to a narrow fissure in the rock face, barely wide enough for a child to squeeze through, definitely too small for a grown man. Sam called into the opening, keeping his voice gentle. "Chayton, my name is Sam. I'm a friend of your teacher, Mary. Your brother Dakota is here with me. Are you in there?" Silence answered him, and Sam tried again, this time using one of the few Apache words he had picked up during his years on the frontier. "Shicky's brother." A small sound came from deep in the fissure, something between a whimper and a word, and Sam felt relief flood through him so intensely it was almost painful. The boy was alive. Everything else could be dealt with if he was alive. Dakota pushed past Sam and called into the opening in Apache, his voice urgent and pleading. An answer came back weak and frightened, and Dakota turned to Sam with eyes that glistened with tears he was too proud to let fall. He's scared. He saw soldiers and hid. He hurt his knee and cannot walk. Sam knelt by the opening, trying to assess the situation. The fissure was maybe 8 inches wide at the entrance, possibly wider inside, but definitely not navigable by anyone larger than a small child. He couldn't go in after Chayton, which meant the boy would have to come out on his own, and fear had driven him deep enough that he couldn't or wouldn't move. Sam sat down on the ground back against the rock face and started talking. Not urgently, not demanding anything, just talking the way he used to talk to Mary when she was small and afraid of thunderstorms. "When I was about your age, I got lost in the woods, scared to death. Thought bears would eat me or wolves would drag me away. I hid in a hollow tree for hours, too frightened to move, even though I could hear my father calling my name." He paused, listening to the silence from the fissure, hoping the boy was listening too. "My father finally found me just before dark. He didn't scold me for wandering off or for being afraid. He just sat down outside that tree and waited until I stopped shaking enough to come out. Then he said something I never forgot. He said being scared means you're smart enough to know danger. Being brave means doing the right thing anyway." More silence, but Sam thought he heard movement, the scrape of small body against stone. "Your brother is here, Chayton. He's been very worried about you, and I promised your teacher, Mary, that I would keep you safe. I'd like to keep that promise if you'll let me." The movement was clearer now, closer to the opening, and after a minute that felt like an hour, a small hand appeared at the entrance to the fissure. Dirt-stained fingers shaking with fear, or cold, or both, reaching out for help or comfort or simple human contact. Dakota moved first, dropping to his knees and grasping his brother's hand, speaking rapidly in Apache words of comfort and encouragement that needed no translation. Slowly, inch by careful inch, the younger boy emerged from his hiding place. 5 years old and weighing maybe 40 pounds, with dark eyes that were too large for his thin face and a right knee that was swollen to twice its normal size, encrusted with dried blood. Sam let Dakota pull his brother free, let the older boy gather the younger into his arms with a fierceness that spoke of bonds deeper than blood of survival shared and losses endured together. When Dakota finally looked up at Sam, his face was wet with tears. He had finally allowed himself to cry. "Thank you. Thank you for finding him." Sam nodded, not trusting his own voice, and turned his attention to Chayton's injury. The knee was badly scraped, but not as far as he could tell broken. The swelling suggested severe bruising and possibly torn ligaments, but the joint moved when carefully manipulated, which ruled out the worst possibilities. The boy had been lucky, if you could call any of this luck. Sam cleaned the wound with water from his canteen, applied more of the woman's yarrow paste, and used strips torn from his own shirt to bind it as securely as possible. Chayton watched him with enormous eyes, flinching at the touch but not pulling away, some instinctive understanding, telling him that this stranger meant help, not harm. "Can you carry him? We need to get back before full dark." Dakota nodded and shifted his brother onto his back, the older boy taking the younger's weight with the ease of long practice. They had made it perhaps 100 yards back toward the cave when Sam heard a sound that froze his blood, a voice young and uncertain calling out from the growing darkness. "Mr. Thornton, please don't shoot." Sam's rifle came up automatically, decades of training overriding thought, but he didn't fire. The figure that emerged from the shadows was a soldier, that much was clear from the uniform. But he was young, maybe 20, and his hands were raised in surrender. More importantly, his rifle was slung over his shoulder, not held ready, and his face carried an expression of desperate sincerity that was hard to fake. "State your name and business, soldier." "Private Thomas Wilson, 7th Cavalry. Sir, I need to speak with you. It's about your daughter." The world narrowed to a point. Every muscle in Sam's body went rigid and his finger tightened on the trigger of his rifle without conscious thought. This boy, this soldier, knew something about Mary. The question was whether Sam wanted to hear it badly enough to not kill him where he stood. "You have 30 seconds. Talk fast." Wilson's voice shook, words tumbling out in a rush of confession and fear. "I'm the one who killed her. I fired the shot that hit your daughter at the mission school. Colonel Brennan ordered us to fire on the building. He said there were Apache raiders inside. I was 19 years old and I was scared, and I pulled the trigger without looking. I saw her fall. I saw the book in her hands. I see her every night when I close my eyes." Sam's world had been reduced to a tunnel with this boy at the end of it, this boy who had murdered Mary, who had taken her from him, who deserved to die more than anyone Sam had ever met. His finger tightened another fraction on the trigger, and all he had to do was squeeze just a little more, and justice, revenge, call it what you will, would be served. Dakota was watching him. The boy with his brother on his back, the boy who had lost his own parents to violence, was watching to see what kind of man Sam Thornton really was. The kind who killed in anger, or the kind who found another way. Mary's voice as clear as if she stood beside him. "Forgiveness is strength, Papa, not weakness." Sam's finger eased off the trigger. He lowered the rifle slightly, but didn't put it away, didn't take his eyes off Wilson. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I can't live with it anymore. Because Colonel Brennan is planning to kill those children, not capture them. Because I won't have more blood on my hands." Wilson pulled a folded paper from inside his uniform jacket and held it out. "Map of Brennan's patrol routes. His plans for the next 3 days. He's going to box you in at the ridge and then sweep through. He'll kill everyone rather than let them escape again." Sam took the map, his hands steady despite the rage and grief and confusion warring in his chest. Part of him wanted to empty his rifle into this boy who had killed Mary. Part of him recognized that doing so would make him no different than Brennan, no better than the system that created orphans and called it policy. "Come with us, but we're going to talk about Mary later when this is done. And if you're lying, if this is some trick—" "It's not. I swear to God, it's not. I just want to make this right if I can. I know I can't bring her back, but maybe I can help save the children she loved. Sam nodded once sharply and gestured for Wilson to follow. They climbed back toward the caves in silence, broken only by labored breathing and the scrape of boots on stone. Dakota carried his brother, Wilson carried his guilt, and Sam carried a rifle that had been pointed at the boy's chest and might be again before this was over. The woman met them at the cave entrance, relief and alarm mixing on her face when she saw the soldier. Sam waved her fears aside. He's with us. We'll explain inside. The cave felt smaller with all of them gathered there, the air close and stale despite the ventilation from the ceiling fissures. Sam tended to Chayton's knee while Wilson stood awkwardly near the entrance, clearly uncomfortable under the hostile stares of 14 Apache children who had every reason to hate soldiers on sight. The woman examined Wilson's map in the dim light, her finger tracing the patrol routes, her expression growing darker with each passing moment. He speaks truth. These are Brennan's patrols. He plans to trap us here and then... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Everyone in the cave old enough to understand knew what happened to Apache caught by soldiers who wanted them dead more than captured. Sam spread the map on the floor and studied it with a soldier's eye. Brennan was being methodical and thorough, covering every approach to the caves with overlapping patrol patterns that would make escape nearly impossible. The only route that showed any weakness was a canyon to the south, narrow and treacherous, but possibly navigable if they move fast and light. We leave at first light. Take only what you can carry. Food, water, medicine, weapons if you have them. We'll head south through this canyon and then east toward Blackwell's trading post. Dakota spoke up from where he sat with his brother. Chayton cannot walk, and Kimmy is too sick to travel. Sam had been trying not to think about that particular problem, but Dakota was right. They had 2 children who couldn't move on their own, 14 children, total 3 adults, and probably 100 square miles of territory swarming with soldiers who wanted them dead. The mathematics of survival didn't add up. I'll carry Kimmy. Wilson, you help Dakota with Chayton. The other children will have to walk and will need to move faster than children naturally want to move. It's going to be hard. The woman looked at him with something that might have been respect or might have been the simple acknowledgement of a fellow soldier making impossible choices. We will manage. We have no choice. They spent the night preparing, doling out the last of the food supplies, filling every container they had with water, checking weapons, and making crude packs from scraps of cloth and leather. The children, even the youngest, worked with a quiet efficiency that spoke of experience with running and hiding and preparing to flee at a moment's notice. No one cried, no one complained. They simply did what needed to be done. Sam fashioned a carrier for Kimmy from his blanket and rope, something that would allow him to carry her on his back while keeping his hands free for his rifle. The little girl was light, frighteningly so, and her fever hadn't broken despite the woman's best efforts with herbs and cool water. She would need real medicine soon, the kind that came from doctors and pharmacies, or she would die. It was that simple and that complicated. Near midnight, with the children finally sleeping in exhausted heaps, Wilson approached Sam where he sat cleaning his rifle by the dim light of a small fire. Mr. Thornton, I need you to know I'm sorry. For Mary. For everything. Sam continued working the cleaning rod through the rifle barrel, the motion automatic and soothing in its familiarity. Sorry doesn't bring her back. No, sir, but maybe helping save these children honors what she tried to do. Maybe that's something. Sam looked up at the boy's face, really looked at it, and saw the genuine anguish there, the desperate need for forgiveness that Sam wasn't sure he could give, even if he wanted to. Mary had believed in second chances. She had believed people could change, could be better than their worst moments. The question was whether Sam could believe that too. My daughter thought education could bridge any divide, thought understanding could stop violence. She died for that belief, whether she meant to or not. You want to honor her memory? Live better. Be better. Teach someone something. Don't just survive. Make something good out of all this waste. Wilson nodded, eyes bright with tears he was trying not to shed. I will. I swear I will. Dawn came, gray and cold mist rising from the ground like ghosts reluctant to leave. They moved out in single file, the woman leading because she knew the terrain, Sam in the middle with Kimmy on his back, Wilson and Dakota helping Chayton, the other children, strung out between them like a chain that was only as strong as its weakest link. The canyon was everything Sam had feared, narrow, rocky, prone to rock slides, and completely exposed to anyone who might be watching from the rims above. They had made it perhaps 3 miles when the weather turned. Summer storms in the mountains came fast and violent, and this one announced itself with thunder that echoed off canyon walls like artillery fire. Rain followed within minutes, not the gentle rain of eastern states, but a desert storm that fell in sheets, turning the canyon floor to mud and the dry stream bed to a rising torrent. Sam shouted for everyone to head for high ground, but the canyon walls were steep and offered few handholds. The children scrambled upward as best they could, the older ones helping the younger. And for a few desperate minutes, Sam thought they might make it. Then he heard the roar. Flash floods in narrow canyons are one of the most dangerous phenomena in the American Southwest walls of water, 6 feet high, that come without warning and sweep away everything in their path. This one was textbook perfect, a churning mass of brown water, studded with rocks and debris, moving at a speed that made escape impossible for anyone still on the canyon floor. One of the older children, a man named Kuruk, who had been helping from behind, suddenly broke away and ran toward a girl who had fallen, who was scrambling to find purchase on mud-slick rock. He reached her, pushed her upward towards safety, and then the water hit him like a fist from an angry gun. He went undersurfaced briefly with arms flailing and then vanished into the churning chaos. Sam didn't think. He handed Kimmy to the nearest child and dove into the flood. The water was cold and violent, full of rocks that battered his body and currents that tried to tear him apart. He couldn't see, couldn't hear anything but the roar of water and his own pulse in his ears. His hand hit something soft, grabbed instinctively, pulled with every ounce of strength he had left. He broke the surface, still holding on to Karuk, who coughed and vomited water, and grabbed at Sam with desperate strength. They went under again, the current dragging them downstream, and Sam's lungs burned for air. His foot found something solid rock, or perhaps just luck, and he pushed upward with everything he had. The second time they surfaced, Wilson was there lying flat on a boulder with his hand outstretched. Sam grabbed it with his free hand while maintaining his grip on Karuk with the other, and between them they managed to haul both men up onto rock that was above the waterline. They lay there gasping like landed fish while the flood raged past below them. Karuk turned his head to look at Sam, and his voice, when he found it, was hoarse with emotion and exhausted confusion. "You saved my life after I—" He didn't finish, but Sam understood. Karuk was the man who had led Brennan to the caves, the one who had betrayed his own people. The woman had told it Sam during the night, had explained that Karuk was the father of one of the 14 children that he had been captured and tortured until he broke, that he had led soldiers here in exchange for the promise that his daughter would be spared. "You're trying to make it right. That's all any of us can do." The flood lasted 20 minutes that felt like hours, and when it finally subsided, they counted heads and assessed damage. Everyone had survived, but they were scattered along a quarter-mile of canyon, soaked and exhausted and frightened. Worst of all, they had lost their supplies, food, water, medicine, everything except what they carried on their bodies. They regrouped on a flat section of ground that was still relatively dry and took inventory. 2 days of hard travel to reach Blackwell's trading post, assuming nothing else went wrong, and no supplies to sustain them on the journey. Kimmy's fever was higher, her breathing more labored, and Chayton's injured knee had swollen to the point where even being carried caused him to whimper with pain. Sam gathered the woman, Wilson, Dakota, and Karuk for a war council, while the younger children rested. "We can't make it 2 days without food or water. We need to risk approaching Blackwell's post directly tonight if possible. It's maybe 10 miles from here if we cut east through the foothills." The woman shook her head. "Brennan will have soldiers watching Blackwell's. He knows we need supplies. Then we create a diversion. Draw them away long enough for the children to reach safety." Wilson pulled out his map, miraculously still intact in a waterproof pouch. "There's a ridge here about 3 miles east. Good sight lines. If we set fires, make it look like a much larger group, we might pull Brennan's forces north while the children go south to Blackwell's." It was a terrible plan, the kind that got people killed in ways that seemed preventable in hindsight. It was also the only plan they had. Sam nodded slowly. "I'll take the ridge. Wilson, you go with the children. Get them to Blackwell's and don't stop for anything." Dakota stood up, his young face set with determination that would have been admirable if it wasn't so likely to get him killed. "I go with Father Sam." The title used for the first time consciously and deliberately hit Sam like a physical blow. Father Sam. This boy, this child who had lost his own father to violence and circumstances was claiming Sam as a replacement, was choosing to follow him into danger because that's what sons did for fathers. Dakota, no, I need you to help your brother, to help the other children. You're their leader. They need you more, and you need someone who knows these mountains. I go with you. Sam looked at the woman who met his gaze with an expression that was equal parts fear and pride and acceptance. She knew as well as he did that you couldn't keep a young man from becoming a warrior if he had decided that's what he was going to be. The only choice was whether to train him well or send him out ignorant and doomed. All right, but you follow my orders exactly. No improvisation, no heroics. We set the fires, draw them off, and then we disappear. Understood. Dakota nodded solemnly, and Sam tried not to think about all the young soldiers he had sent into battle during the war, tried not to remember how many of them had come back in pieces or not at all. They moved out in two groups. The woman led the main body south and east toward Blackwell's trading post, carrying Kimmy and helping Chayton, the other children following in her wake like ducklings following their mother. Sam and Dakota headed northeast toward the ridge, moving fast through terrain that grew progressively more broken and difficult as they gained elevation. They reached the ridge as the sun touched the western horizon, casting long shadows across a landscape that would have been beautiful if it wasn't so deadly. Sam gathered deadfall and dry brush while Dakota scouted the area, and together they built 3 large piles of kindling, spaced 100 yards apart. When darkness fell complete, Sam lit them in quick succession, creating beacons that could be seen for miles, and that would hopefully draw every soldier in the area like moths to flame. The response was faster than Sam had hoped. Within 20 minutes, he could see movement in the valley below, soldiers on horseback, converging on their position with the coordination of a well-trained military unit. Brennan had taken the bait. Now the question was whether they could escape before the trap closed around them. The soldiers converged on the ridge with military precision, their movements coordinated by bugle calls that echoed off the canyon walls like the voices of hunting wolves. Sam watched them come through the gathering darkness, counted at least 15 men on horseback, and knew with absolute certainty that he and Dakota were about to die if they didn't move immediately. They ran. Down the backside of the ridge through terrain so steep that running was more like controlled falling. Sam led and Dakota followed with the sure-footedness of youth and desperation. Behind them came shouts and the crack of rifle fire bullets striking rock and sending stone chips flying like shrapnel. Sam felt one pass close enough to hear the whisper of its passage, felt the heat of near-miss death, and kept running. They reached a dry stream bed choked with boulders and threw themselves behind the largest one they could find. Sam's lungs burned, his legs trembled with exhaustion, and the old wound from Antietam had reopened, blood seeping through the bandage the woman had applied. Dakota pressed against the rock beside him, breathing hard but controlled his young face set with concentration rather than fear. The sound of hoofbeats grew closer, then stopped. Voices called out in the darkness, soldiers spreading out to search, to surround, to capture, or kill. Sam checked his rifle, found he had perhaps 6 rounds left, and knew it wouldn't be enough. 6 bullets against 15 soldiers meant dying hard, but dying nonetheless. Then a new sound cut through the night. Hoofbeats from a different direction coming fast, and a voice Sam recognized calling out commands that made the searching soldiers freeze in place. Stand down, and all units stand down immediately. Colonel Marcus Brennan rode into the stream bed like an avenging angel, his face pale in the moonlight, his uniform disheveled in a way that suggested he had been riding hard for hours. Behind him came Sergeant Ben Carter and 10 more soldiers, creating a standoff between 2 factions of the same army who were suddenly pointing weapons at each other instead of at Sam and Dakota. Brennan dismounted and walked directly towards Sam's position, hands away from his weapons posture, carefully non-threatening. He stopped 10 feet away and spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. Sam Thornton, I'm asking you to come out. No one is going to shoot. You have my word. Sam stayed behind the boulder rifle trained on Brennan's chest, every instinct screaming that this was a trap. Your word doesn't mean much to me right now, Marcus. Brennan nodded as if he had expected that response. Fair, but I'm not here to arrest you. I'm here to stop Captain Reynolds from murdering children. The name meant nothing to Sam, but the tone in Brennan's voice carried weight. Whatever had happened since their last encounter, something had changed in the colonel, something fundamental enough to bring him here instead of sending subordinates. Why should I believe you? Brennan was silent for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice carried a weariness that went beyond physical exhaustion into something closer to spiritual defeat. Because I held a 6-year-old girl dying of fever in my arms yesterday, and I saw my son's face in hers. Because I've spent 7 years trying to kill every Apache I could find, thinking it would bring Robert back, and all I've done is create more orphans. Because I'm tired, Sam. Tired of the killing. Tired of the hate. Tired of being a monster. Sam stood slowly, keeping his rifle ready, and stepped out from behind the boulder. Dakota followed, staying close, his knife visible in his hand. The two sides of the army watched each other with the tension of men who weren't sure whether they were about to witness a surrender or a massacre. Brennan looked older than Sam remembered, the shadows under his eyes speaking of nights without sleep, the tremor in his hands suggesting a man held together by will alone. His gaze moved from Sam to Dakota, and something in his expression softened. This is one of the children. This is Dakota. He's 12 years old. His parents were killed in a cavalry raid 3 years ago. He's been taking care of 13 other orphans ever since. Brennan knelt slowly, bringing himself to eye level with the boy, and when he spoke, his voice was gentle in a way Sam had never heard from him before. I'm sorry for what happened to your parents. I'm sorry for all of it. Dakota studied Brennan's face with the careful assessment of someone who had learned that adults could not be trusted to tell the truth, then looked to Sam for guidance. Sam gave the slightest nod, permission to speak or stay silent, as the boy chose. Teacher Mary said sorry is just a word. Action is what matters. Brennan's smile was sad and self-aware. Your teacher was wise. What action would you have me take? Before Dakota could answer, the sound of more horses approaching made everyone tense. A bugle call rang out, different from the hunting calls of earlier, and a new force of cavalry crested the ridge. At their head rode a man whose uniform marked him as significantly higher rank than anyone else present, and whose bearing suggested he was accustomed to being obeyed without question. General William Hayes had served in the Union Army for 30 years, rising from lieutenant to general, through a combination of competence, political acumen, and the simple fact of surviving battles that killed men with less luck or skill. At 55, he retained the sharp eyes of a man who missed nothing, and the patience of someone who understood that most problems solved themselves if you gave them time. He surveyed the scene before him with obvious displeasure. Two factions of soldiers pointing weapons at each other, a civilian and a child standing in the middle, and Colonel Brennan looking like he was one bad decision away from a complete breakdown. Someone want to explain why my entire fort is out here in the middle of the night having what appears to be a civil war? Brennan straightened to attention, old habits asserting themselves despite his obvious exhaustion. Sir Captain Reynolds disobeyed direct orders and attempted to execute 14 Apache children without trial or cause. I was attempting to prevent. Hayes held up a hand, silencing Brennan mid-sentence. Where is Captain Reynolds? A lieutenant from the other group spoke up, his voice uncertain. Sir, the captain is at Blackwell's trading post. He sent us to capture the fugitives while he secured the location. Sam felt ice form in his stomach. Blackwell's trading post was where the woman had taken the children, where they were supposed to find safety and supplies. If Reynolds was there with soldiers who believed their orders were to kill rather than capture, then everything they had done, all the running and hiding and desperate fighting, had been for nothing. Hayes turned to Sam, and his expression suggested he was rapidly putting together pieces of a puzzle he didn't like. You're Samuel Thornton. I remember you from the war. Good officer, solid tactical sense. What's your part in this mess? I'm trying to keep 14 children alive, sir. Children whose only crime is being Apache in a territory that wants them dead. Hayes nodded slowly, then made a decision with the speed of a man who had commanded troops in combat and knew that hesitation killed as surely as bullets. Sergeant Carter, take 15 men and ride for Blackwell's at full speed. If Captain Reynolds has harmed a single child, arrest him and place him in irons. Colonel Brennan, you're with me. Thornton, you too. We're going to sort this out properly with testimony and evidence, not with rifles in the dark. The ride to Blackwell's trading post took 3 hours at a pace that left horses lathered and men exhausted. They arrived to find the trading post surrounded by soldiers, the gate barred, and inside the sound of children crying. Hayes dismounted and walked to the gate with the kind of purposeful stride that suggested he was done with subtlety and ready to start breaking things if necessary. His voice when he called out carried the weight of 3 decades of command. "Captain Reynolds, this is General William Hayes. Open this gate immediately or I will have my men break it down and you will face court-martial for insubordination." A man's voice answered from inside, younger than Brennan Harder. "Sir, these are Apache hostiles. Protocol requires. Protocol requires you to follow orders from superior officers. I am giving you a direct order. Open the gate." Silence followed tension, stretching thin enough to snap, and then the sound of bars being lifted. The gate swung open to reveal Henry Blackwell standing there with a shotgun in his hands and fury on his face. Behind him stood the woman, the children clustered around her like chicks around a hen, and behind them all stood Captain Reynolds with 5 soldiers, their rifles pointed at the group. Hayes took in the scene with a single sweeping glance, and his voice when he spoke could have frozen the desert sun. "Captain Reynolds, lower your weapons, now!" Reynolds didn't move, and Sam could see the calculation in his eyes, the weighing of odds and consequences. A younger man, maybe 35, with the kind of righteousness that made dangerous fanatics. He believed absolutely in what he was doing, which made him far more dangerous than simple cruelty ever could. "Sir, these savages have killed American soldiers. They've raided settlements. They are children, Captain. And unless you want to explain to a military tribunal why you murdered 14 children in cold blood, you will lower your weapons and stand down." For a moment that felt eternal. Reynolds considered defying a direct order from a general. Sam's hand moved to his rifle. Brennan stepped forward slightly, and every soldier present understood that whatever happened in the next 10 seconds would determine whether this ended in justice or bloodshed. Reynolds lowered his rifle. The tension broke like a fever, and Hayes moved into the trading post with the confidence of a man who had just won a battle without firing a shot. He surveyed the children, taking in their malnourished frames and frightened faces, then turned to the woman with surprising courtesy. "Ma'am, I'm General William Hayes. Are you and the children unharmed?" She studied him with the same careful assessment she had given Sam at their first meeting, looking for the trap, for the lie, for the betrayal that experience had taught her always came eventually. "We are alive for now." Hayes nodded as if that was an answer enough, then turned to face his assembled officers and men. "So at this moment, Captain Reynolds is under arrest for insubordination and attempted murder. Sergeant Carter, place him in irons and have him transported to Fort Whipple for court-martial. The rest of you are dismissed to barracks. Colonel Brennan, Mr. Thornton, I'll see you and the Apache woman in Mr. Blackwell's office. We're going to have a conversation about the future." The office was small and cramped, with all of them present, but Hayes commanded the space through sheer force of personality. He sat behind Blackwell's desk like he owned it, gestured for the others to find seats or stand, as they preferred, and fixed them all with a gaze that suggested he was done with games and ready for truth. "Mr. Blackwell, I apologize for my men occupying your establishment without permission. The Army will compensate you for any damages or losses." Henry nodded but didn't speak, his shotgun now leaning against the wall but still within reach. "Now then, someone explained to me from the beginning how we got to a place where a captain in the United States Army was about to murder 14 children." Sam told the story, starting with the auction in Prescott and ending with the flash flood in the canyon. He left nothing out: his daughter's death, Wilson's confession, Brennan's pursuit, the children's circumstances. When he finished, Hayes sat in silence for a full minute, his fingers steepled in front of his face. Then he turned to Brennan. "Colonel, I've known you for 15 years. I've watched you become one of the finest officers in the territory. I've also watched you become someone I barely recognize. What happened?" Brennan's voice was barely above a whisper. "I lost my son, sir. I lost my wife. I lost everything that made me human, and I spent 7 years trying to find it again by killing the people I blamed. But revenge doesn't bring anyone back. It just creates more graves." Hayes nodded slowly, then addressed the woman. "What's your name, ma'am?" She hesitated, and Sam realized he still didn't know the answer to that question. She had been the woman or the Apache in his mind, never a person with a name and a history beyond what he had observed. "I am Ayasha, daughter of Chief Nantai, widow of the warrior Neshoba, mother to 14 children, not born of my body, but claimed by my heart." Hayes absorbed this with the same careful attention he had given everything else, then made a decision that would echo through the years to come. I'm instituting a new policy in this territory. Apache who cannot or will not go to reservations may settle on private land if appropriate guardianship can be established and if they commit to remaining peaceful. Mr. Thornton, you have property. 160 acres about 30 miles north. Ranch land mostly unused since my daughter died. Would you be willing to serve as legal guardian for these children, to provide them education, shelter, and the protection your status as a white landowner would grant? Sam looked at Ayesha, seeing her pride wrestle with practicality, seeing her weigh the cost of accepting help from the system that had tried to destroy her people against the certain death that awaited if she refused. Her eyes met his, and in them he saw the question that words couldn't ask. Could she trust him not just for a day or a week, but for years? Could she risk the children's lives on the word of a man who had paid $3 and called it freedom? If Ayesha agrees, then yes, but this has to be her choice, not mine. Ayesha studied Sam's face for a long moment, reading truth or lies in the lines around his eyes and the set of his jaw. Finally, she nodded. We accept, but I will teach them our ways as well as yours. They will know both worlds. Hayes smiled for the first time since arriving. That's exactly what I'm hoping for. Colonel Brennan, you're reassigned effective immediately. Report to Fort Whipple for psychiatric evaluation and desk duty pending my final decision on your commission. Sergeant Carter will take temporary command of frontier operations. Brennan nodded, the relief visible on his face at being released from a duty that had been destroying him from the inside. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me. Do better. That's all any of us can do. Hayes stood, signaling the meeting's end, and pulled out official papers that would make Sam legal guardian and grant Ayesha unprecedented legal protection for an Apache woman. As he signed the documents, Sam felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders, the understanding that 14 lives now depended on his choices and his ability to provide not just food and shelter, but hope for a future worth living. The woman Ayesha, her name finally known, approached him after Hayes and Brennan had left. They stood in the growing dawn light outside the trading post, the children sleeping inside, finally safe, finally fed, finally allowed to simply be children for a few hours. Those $3, you did not buy my freedom that day. Sam looked at her, curious. No, freedom is not given or bought. It is chosen. You gave me the chance to choose. She placed her hand on his arm, briefly a gesture that carried more meaning than words could express, then turned and went back in mud to be with the children. Sam stood alone in the dawn, thinking about Mary and Sarah and all the people he had failed to save, and for the first time in 8 months, he felt something that might eventually become peace. The journey to Sam's ranch took 5 days, the pace deliberately slow to accommodate injured children in simple exhaustion. They arrived to find the property in worse condition than Sam remembered, fields overgrown. The house weathered everything, carrying the patina of neglect that comes when a man stops caring, whether he lives or dies. Dakota walked the perimeter of the property with Sam, asking questions about the land, the water sources, the possibilities for crops and livestock. The boy was already thinking like a man, already planning for a future that included this place and these people, and Sam found himself teaching, without quite meaning to, showing Dakota how to read the land, how to judge soil quality, how to plan for seasons that hadn't arrived yet. We can make this work, Father Sam. The title had stuck, and Sam no longer corrected it. Dakota needed a father, and Sam needed something to live for beyond simple survival. If they could be those things for each other, perhaps that was redemption enough. The first weeks were brutally hard. They cleaned the house, repaired the roof, cleared fields, planted crops that might or might not grow in time to sustain them through winter. The children worked without complaint, even the youngest finding ways to contribute, and Ayesha organized them with military efficiency that reminded Sam of sergeants he had known during the war. Wilson stayed for 3 months before leaving to pursue teaching credentials back east. Before he left, he sat with Sam one evening and spoke of Mary with the reverence due to saints or martyrs. I see her in everything I do now. Every child I plan to teach, every book I read. I can't bring her back, but maybe I can pass on what she believed in. Sam gave him Mary's blood-stained primer, the book she had died holding, and watched the young man's face crumble with grief and gratitude. Teach someone to read. Honor her that way. Kuruk stayed working as hunter and scout, earning his place through consistent effort and quiet dedication to his daughter Haniyi and the other children. The betrayal that had brought soldiers to the caves was never forgotten, but it was forgiven in the way that actions speak louder than words. He provided when they were hungry, protected when they were threatened, and asked nothing in return except the chance to be a father again. Neighbors came slowly, cautiously drawn by curiosity about the strange household that housed Apache children and a grieving white man. Some came with suspicion, some with hostility, but a few came with open minds and found themselves impressed by what they saw. Children learning, working, thriving. A community being built from nothing through sheer stubborn will. Ruth Calloway arrived in the spring with her daughter in a wagon full of supplies. A widow herself, she understood loss and the need to build something from the ashes of what had been taken. She and Ayasha formed an unlikely friendship, two strong women recognizing each other across the divide of culture and circumstance. When Washington threatened to revoke the arrangement, claiming that Apache children needed to be in government schools where they could be properly civilized, Ruth organized a petition. 200 settlers signed it, vouching for the Thornton household, arguing that what was happening there promoted peace and understanding better than any reservation ever had. Sam testified before the territorial governor, spoke of Mary's dream and the children's progress, and watched a political man make a political calculation that happened to fall on the side of allowing the experiment to continue. Years passed with the rhythm of seasons and cycles, winters hard and summers harder, but slowly, incrementally, the ranch became something more than Sam had imagined. The original 14 children grew, some staying to help build, some leaving to make their own ways in a world that was changing whether it wanted to or not. 5 years after that first arrival, Sam stood on his porch watching Dakota work with the younger children, teaching them mathematics and reading with the patience of someone born to educate. The boy had become a young man of 17, already thinking about university, about returning with knowledge that could be shared, about becoming the first Apache teacher officially certified by the territory. Ayasha joined Sam on the porch, her presence comfortable in the way of people who have shared hardship and emerged stronger. He will go east for school. The scholarship came today. Sam felt pride and sorrow in equal measure. Dakota had become the son he had never had, the legacy Mary would have wanted, and watching him leave would hurt in ways Sam was still learning to name. He'll come back. This place is in his bones now, as it is in all of us. She was right. The ranch had become home, not just shelter, and the people on it had become family through choice rather than blood. It was what Mary would have wanted, what she had died believing was possible. Dakota left for university in Boston carrying Sam's Colt Navy 1851, a gift, and symbol passed from father to son, from one generation to the next. The parting was difficult, full of the unspoken emotions that men carry but rarely voice. Make me proud, son. I already am proud, Father Sam, of you, of all of us. I'll come back and teach others what you taught me. Kimmy, the little girl who had nearly died of fever in the caves, grew into a young woman with a calling. She apprenticed with the circuit doctor, learning Western medicine, then convinced Ayasha to teach her traditional Apache healing. By 21, she was serving both communities, bridging two medical traditions, saving lives that might have been lost to suspicion or ignorance. 15 years after Sam had paid $3 at an auction in Prescott, the ranch had become something extraordinary. The original 14 children had grown scattered, succeeded. 8 remained on the ranch, helping to expand it into a community that now served 40 students from all backgrounds. Dakota had returned from university as promised, the first Apache teacher certified by the Arizona Territory, and was establishing satellite schools across the region. The territorial government officially recognized what everyone locally already knew: the Thornton and Ayasha Academy was a model for how different cultures could coexist, learn from each other, and build something neither could have built alone. They held a dedication ceremony on a clear autumn day, renaming the school the Mary Catherine Thornton Memorial Academy. General Hayes attended, retired now, but still carrying the authority of decades of service. Henry Blackwell came with his new wife. Ruth Calloway brought 3 generations of family. And in the back row, almost hidden, sat Marcus Brennan. The former colonel had aged badly, the years of guilt and self-recrimination carving deep lines in his face. He had funded schools quietly, anonymously, trying to balance scales that could never truly be balanced. When he caught Sam's eyes, Sam nodded in acknowledgement. Not forgiveness exactly, but recognition that Brennan was trying. That effort counted for something. Dakota spoke as the new headmaster, his voice strong and clear. This school exists because one grieving father chose to build instead of destroy, because one Apache mother chose to trust, because children chose to learn instead of hate. We honor Mary Catherine Thornton, who believed education could bridge any divide. Her dream lives here in all of us. When Sam's turn came to speak, he walked slowly to the podium, feeling every one of his 67 years in the ache of joints and the slight tremor in his hands. The crowd grew silent, waiting for wisdom from a man who had somehow turned personal tragedy into communal triumph. I'm not good with speeches, never have been, but I'll tell you what I learned at it. 15 years ago, I paid $3 for a woman's freedom. People thought I was crazy. Hell, I thought I was crazy. But here's what those $3 bought. They bought a choice. Ayesha's choice to trust. The children's choice to learn. This community's choice to build something new. Every day is a choice. To hate or to love. To destroy or to build. To give up or keep going. I've buried a wife. I've buried a daughter. I've buried friends and enemies and people who were both at once. That's life. We don't get to choose what we lose. We only get to choose what we do with what remains. These children are what remains. This school is what remains. The bridges we've built between people who were told they should be enemies, that's what remains. Mary's gone, but her dream isn't. It's right here in every student who learns, in every prejudice that gets challenged, and every time someone chooses understanding over ignorance. That's worth $3. Hell, it's worth everything I had to give. The applause was long and genuine, and Sam saw tears on faces both Apache and white, saw people reaching across divides to clasp hands in shared emotion. He found Brennan afterward in the shadow of the main building where the former colonel stood alone. Marcus? Sam, hell of a thing you've built here. Hell of a thing we've all built, including you with those schools you've been funding. Brennan's eyes widened slightly. You knew. General Hayes told me, said you've put over $2,000 into education programs. That's good work, Marcus. Important work. It doesn't bring Robert back. Doesn't erase what I've done. No, but it helps. And helping is enough. It has to be. They stood together in companionable silence, two old soldiers watching children play, and for a moment the weight of history lifted enough to breathe. The years that followed brought the inevitable changes of time. Some of the original war team thrived, becoming teachers, healers, ranchers, leaders. Two died, one to influenza and one to a horse accident, and Sam mourned them as deeply as he had mourned Mary. Loss never got easier, he discovered. You just got better at carrying it. Ayesha remained his partner in building, never his wife, because neither of them wanted that particular bond, but his friend in the deepest sense. They had built something together that transcended romance, something more durable because it was chosen daily rather than bound by vows. At 68, Sam fell ill. Pneumonia, the doctor said, brought on by a hard winter in a body that had simply been pushed too far for too long. He refused to die in bed, insisted on being carried to his porch chair where he could watch the children play and see the school that bore his daughter's name. Ayesha sat with him through those final days, their silence comfortable and complete. Dakota visited daily, bringing his own children, now grandchildren that weren't Sam's by blood, but were by every measure that mattered. We did good, didn't we? Sam's voice was barely above a whisper, his breath coming short. We did good, Samuel Thornton. When I'm gone, tell the children I was proud. Tell them they made an old soldier's last year's worth living. Tell them yourself tomorrow. Sam smiled, knowing there would be no tomorrow and finding peace in that knowledge. He had lived longer than he deserved, built more than he had dreamed, and found redemption in the last place he expected. The sun was warm on his face. Children's laughter carried on the wind, and Mary's dream lived in every lesson taught in the school that bore her name. He closed his eyes and did not open them again. They buried him beside Mary, the two graves united in death as they had been separated in life. 200 people attended the funeral, a testament to how far ripples spread when you throw a stone into still water. General Hayes spoke. Henry Blackwell spoke. Dakota spoke with a voice that broke but did not falter. The gravestone read simply, Samuel Thornton, 1823 to 1891. He chose to build bridges, not walls. Beloved father, teacher, friend. In the years that followed, the Thornton Ayesha Academy continued to grow. By 1900, it educated 100 students. By 1910, Kimmy's hospital served the entire territory. By 1920, Dakota was superintendent of schools across 3 counties, and Apache children learned alongside white children, as if that had always been the natural order of things. The original 14 children produced 300 descendants who carried forward the lessons learned in mountain caves and on a rundown ranch where an old soldier decided that building was better than dying, that love was stronger than hate, that $3 spent on giving someone a choice could change the world. Ayasha lived to see her 80th birthday spent surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren who called her grandmother in 2 languages. She died peacefully in her sleep, and they buried her beside Sam and Mary, 3 stones marking 3 lives that had intersected and created something that outlasted them all. The Thornton Ayasha Academy operated until 1930 when it was absorbed into the public school system of the newly formed state of Arizona. But its legacy lived in the 500 students who had passed through its doors in the bridges, built between communities that had been told they should hate each other, and the simple proof that people could choose to be better than their worst instincts if given the chance. And if you visit that cemetery north of Prescott, even now, you'll find 3 graves side by side, and sometimes there are fresh flowers there left by descendants who remember that their grandmother was bought for $3 and chose freedom, that their grandfather was a soldier who chose peace, that their great-aunt was a teacher who chose love. Some legacies are measured in acres, some in gold. Sam Thornton's was measured in the children he saved, the bridges he built, and the simple truth that freedom isn't purchased or given. It's chosen daily in small acts of courage and kindness that ripple outward long after the people who made them have turned to dust. $3. The price of a bottle of whiskey, or a hot meal, or a night's lodging. Or if spent right, the price of proving that humanity is stronger than hate, that redemption is possible, and that even broken people can build something beautiful if they're willing to try.